Okay. So we're learning the Chumash with Orach Chaim HaKadosh and the insights of the Orach Chaim on the beginning of the portion of Toldos. Okay. Let me see if this is working. Okay, I'm just trying to live stream it on YouTube. Um, so I think it's working, but I'm not sure. The Orach Chaim discusses the first pasuk, so we're going to be talking about the first pasuk, and Orach Chaim mentions 7 insights into the meaning of the first pasuk, 7 explanations. He's not satisfied with 1; he goes to 7. And the first insight of the Orach Chaim is basically going to ask a few questions on the wording of the words that the verse chose, that Hashem chose to put in the first verse of this parsha, and that those 2 questions are going to be the topic of the discussion of all of these interpretations. So it starts with these 2 questions, and then we have these 7 interpretations. What are the 2 questions? The first question, what was the verse say? Let's start with the verse. The verse says, these are the toildos of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. These are it could mean the children, the descendants of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. It could also mean these are the good deeds. The toildos are Maisim Tovim, the good deeds of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. And then it says, Avraham hoilid es Yitzchak. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So the verse sounds to be very redundant. And the Orach Chaim says it's not only redundant, it's out of place. In other words, what do we need it to say, Avraham hoilid es Yitzchak? Why does it have to tell us Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak? We're not talking about Avraham's birthing. We're talking about Yitzchak's offspring, not Avraham's offspring. These are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. And then it jumps back to Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. First of all, you just said Yitzchak ben Avraham. Also, we know that from the last few parshas about all of Yitzchak's birth. We know how Yitzchak was born, to Avraham, how old he was. So the verse doesn't have to tell us, who that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. But it's also like, why would it jump to that when we're talking about Yitzchak's offspring or Yitzchak's good deeds? It somehow jumps back and says, by the way, Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. What do we need to know? Somehow there's some hint to something about Yitzchak's life and Yitzchak's offspring that we need it to say Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So what is that the pasuk is hinting to us? That it adds this idea, these are the offspring of Yitzchak, and Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So it's out of place, number 1. And number 2, it's something that we know already. We definitely know that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. It's been the topic of discussion in the Chumash, what we've been reading over the last few parshas. Hashem promised him a child, and he finally had a child, and he brought him as a sacrifice on the altar. We definitely know that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. If we didn't learn it in kindergarten, we definitely know it from the last few parshas. So the first interpretation of the Orach Chaim is as follows. The first interpretation is that Yitzchak, and this is a little Kabbalistic, and the Orach Chaim mentions this a few places. This is not the first time that the Orach Chaim mentions it. It's interesting that it's mentioned a number of times, but the Orach Chaim doesn't seem to want to explain it well, because I guess it's Kabbalistic, so he tries to keep it a little concealed. But this is his point. He says, Yitzchak was not able to give birth. It's based on the writings of the Arizal, Makubal, the famous Kabbalist, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. Yitzchak was unable to have children. And the reason he was unable to have children was he had a soul that was somehow his soul was not able to have children. And what happened was when he was brought as a sacrifice on the altar, Abraham was told by Hashem, bring him as a sacrifice, and Yitzchak was brought there. At that moment, Abraham brought into Yitzchak a soul that was capable of having children, and that's why Yitzchak has children, meaning Yitzchak was really unable to have kids. He was not going to be able to father children. When he became 37 years old and he was brought as a sacrifice, it says over there's a hint that all of a sudden now he's going to be able to have a child. And so the moment, the time that he was there as a sacrifice, that gave him that ability. He was given this new ability that he didn't have before, that now he's going to be able to be a father. He's going to be capable of fathering a child, and it has to do something with the soul. He needed a different type of soul. The soul he had until now was not a soul that could have a child. And what was the Orach Chaim in another place, in another parsha, Lech Lecha, the Orach Chaim says that there is a place, there's a pasuk in Lech Lecha where it mentions that Hashem tells Abraham, you're going to have a child. And Abraham laughs, or the word is laughs, but it means he was very excited. But he tells Hashem, halavai lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha. I wish let Yishmael be righteous. That's what he tells Hashem. I would like Yishmael to be righteous. And at that point, the Orach Chaim says that statement was somewhat of a inappropriate statement to Hashem. Hashem tells him he's going to have a child, and he said, "No, I just want Yishmael to be righteous." And so the Orach Chaim explains over there that at that point, what ended up happening was that Yitzchak was not going to be able to father children. That was going to be the soul that, because Abraham chose Yishmael over Yitzchak, it caused that Yitzchak would not be able to father kids. And when did that change? That changed at the Akedah, at the Mount Moriah, where Yitzchak was brought as a sacrifice. That was where Yitzchak was then given a new soul, the soul that will be capable of having children. And because of that, our pasuk, the Eila Toildos Yitzchak, these are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. It says Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. It doesn't mean he gave birth to him. It means that Abraham drew into Yitzchak by bringing him as a sacrifice. He as Yitzchak, he caused Yitzchak to father children. So when we talk about the children of Yitzchak, the pasuk mentions, by the way, it's Abraham that caused him to be able to have children because of the Akedah, because of the bringing him as a sacrifice. That's what actually brought him. That's what caused him to be able to have children. Otherwise, he had a soul, according to the writings of the Arizal, the Reb Yitzchak Luria, he had a soul that was incapable of having children. And this was like a miracle that because of the Akedah, Abraham caused him to be able to have a child. So that's why it mentions it here, that these are the offspring of Yitzchak, because it's actually, we have to give credit, or we have to remember where it came from. Where did he get this soul? He got this soul from Abraham, drawing it to him through bringing him as a sacrifice. That's what caused him to be able to get this new neshama, this new soul, this special soul that would be able to have a child. Somehow, initially, he wasn't able to. He had a soul, which is in the writings of Kabbalah, it's called Misitra de Nukva, which literally means it's from the side of the female, which means that he was not able to be to be to father children. And I'm sure there's more to it in the Kabbalistic writings, but at least for us, that's what the Orach Chaim mentions, and he sort of like leaves it at that, which means that he's not sharing with us any of the deeper meanings of this Kabbalistic idea. But the point is that that Abraham caused the Yitzchak to be able to have children by bringing him up as a sacrifice. It is interesting. I will just mention that according to the other statement of the Orach Chaim, where he says it could be, he gives an option that maybe the Orach Chaim, maybe the pasuk means in Parshas Lech Lecha that because Abraham chose Yishmael, that's what caused him not to be able to have a child. In other words, that's what caused that when Hashem made Sarah pregnant, she ended up having a child, Yitzchak, who did not have a soul that was able to have a child. It sounds like it's also Abraham's fault that Yitzchak would not have children. So in a certain sense, it's Abraham's fault in the first place. But I guess what the Orach Chaim means over here is that even though it might have been Abraham's fault in the first place, but Abraham was able to rectify that by bringing him as a sacrifice on the Akedah, and therefore ultimately giving him this soul that could have a child, causing him to have a soul that could have a child, and therefore Yitzchak is going to have children. That's the first interpretation, and that's Kabbalistic. The second interpretation is that Abraham is a tzaddik, and Yitzchak is the son of a tzaddik. What does this mean? Abraham is a tzaddik, he's righteous. Yitzchak is the child of Abraham, he's the son of a tzaddik. And this is the reason that Yitzchak's prayer, why does Yitzchak have children? Because Hashem listens to his prayer. Yitzchak prayed for children, and Hashem listened to his prayer. And the reason Hashem listened to his prayer is because, you know why? Because his father is also a tzaddik. What does that mean? Of course, Hashem listens to every Yid's prayer, but sometimes there's a prayer that needs extra energy to it. It's you're davening for a big miracle. When you daven for a big miracle, you need extra merit. And Avraham gave this extra merit to Yitzchak because Avraham was the father. So therefore, Yitzchak had that extra merit, and his prayer was answered that he would have children. So the point of the pasuk is these are the offspring of Yitzchak. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak, and therefore Yitzchak has offspring. So it's an explanation of the fact that Yitzchak has offspring. Is how does he have offspring? It's because Avraham is his father, and he has the merit of a prayer of a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik. He's got his prayer is going to be answered, as we'll see a little later in the verse, that Hashem listens to Yitzchak's prayer. And the reason is because Abraham gave birth to him, and therefore he has the merit of both Yitzchak and Abraham and his father Abraham. Now comes the third interpretation. And the third interpretation is based on a pasuk in Yeshaya, that the pasuk says over there, Liyaakov asher pada es Avraham. Jacob redeemed Abraham. What does it mean Yaakov redeemed Avraham? It means the Medrash says that there's a Medrash that says that because Avraham was going to have such a special grandchild, Yaakov, Jacob, so therefore Avraham was saved from the fire at Ur Kasdim. So that's the meaning of a verse, or at least it's a hint, one of the deeper meanings of this verse in Isaiah, that it's Yaakov gave birth, that Yaakov redeemed Avraham. Yaakov, the grandchild, redeemed his grandfather. That his grandfather was saved from the fire when Avraham's father brought him to Nimrod. He was angry that his father had taken Avraham's father, took him to Nimrod, the king at the time, because Avraham's father was angry that Avraham had broken all the idols, and that was the business that they were in. They were in the idol selling. They sold idols, and so he took him to Nimrod. Nimrod threw him into a furnace, and the story is that because of Jacob because of Yaakov, Abraham was saved. That's it, according to one of the midrashim. One of the midrashim says that Yaakov's merit was that Abraham's merit was that he has a grandson, Yaakov. So, what is the meaning of this? That the meaning of this is that if you read this pasuk a little different way of reading it, you'll come out with this interpretation that it says, "Ela told us Yitzchak ben Avram." These are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, and Abraham hoiled as Yitzchak. This caused the fact that Yitzchak has grandchildren, or Yitzchak has children, has a son, Jacob. These are the offspring of Yitzchak, and that caused that Abraham would be alive. Abraham was able to give birth to Yitzchak. In other words, why did Abraham have a child, Yitzchak? Abraham should have died in Ur Kasdim. It's Elah told Yitzchak ben Abraham. These are the offspring of Yitzchak, meaning Jacob, and because of that, Abraham was able to give birth to Yitzchak. If not for the merit of Jacob, Abraham would never have given birth to Yitzchak. So if we talk about the offspring of Yitzchak, we mentioned that actually caused that Abraham would have a child, Yitzchak. So that's the meaning of adding this extra sentence into the pasuk, into the verse. That why is extra statement of Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak, meaning that this is part of the offspring. The offspring of Yitzchak is the fact that Abraham gave birth to him. That's all because of the offspring of Yitzchak, because Jacob's merit. Okay, so now that pasuk actually has other meanings. I should mention it's even brought in Tanya brings this pasuk as well. Yaakov asher padas Avram, that it talks about if a person is can't develop love for Hashem. Avraham stands for love for Hashem, and Jacob symbolizes mercy. So if a person is in a state where he's not able to develop or can't overcome his evil inclination, so he uses the method of Yaakov, of Jacob, and that gives him the ability to overcome and to handle, to follow in the derech of Avraham. So that's just another interpretation of that puzzle. Okay, now comes the fourth interpretation of the Or HaChaim. Here's the fourth interpretation, and the fourth interpretation is that the pasuk that our parsha begins with, Paradise, is not about the offspring; it's about the good deeds. So now we're going to the Paradise means Maisim Toivim. It means the good deeds of Yitzchak. These are the good deeds of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. And so now we've got, this is again, fourth interpretation of the pasuk. And the main reason why the Or HaChaim is bringing all of these interpretations is he has these two questions of why does it have to say Avraham Hoilid es Yitzchak? Why does it have to say that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak if it's something that it just doesn't fit here and we know it already? So these are the two questions, and the Or HaChaim's fourth interpretation is that these are the offspring of Yitzchak, means these are the good deeds of Yitzchak. And so now that we're translating it differently, and now we are explaining that these are the good deeds of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. It's emphasizing that although we don't know much about Yitzchak's good deeds, we know a lot about Avraham, but we don't really know much about Yitzchak. The only thing we know about Yitzchak is that Yitzchak was brought as a sacrifice. But guess what? Even when he was brought as a sacrifice, there are two ways of interpreting it. Number one, it could be that he was agreeable, but there's another way of interpreting it. That Avraham tied him up, and he didn't exactly know what was happening. He was stuck. He was forced into it. Avraham was stronger than him, and he tied him up. And Yitzchak, it was against his will. So we don't even know if the Akedah, if the tying of the binding of Isaac was really a merit for Isaac. Again, it was definitely a merit for Abraham, but was it really something that Yitzchak gets full credit for, or was he forced? Was it against his will? So there is such an interpretation mentioned in the Even Ezra, but the point is that in the Torah we don't find so much good deeds about Yitzchak. So the Torah tells us, Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. These are the good deeds of Yitzchak, and then it mentions that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak, meaning that like father, like son, that the one who came from him is the same as, in other words, Yitzchak is just like Avraham. That whatever you find with Avraham, it's the same thing with Yitzchak. And if Avraham was completely righteous, so was Yitzchak. So therefore, the pasuk is emphasizing that Avram Hoyledes Yitzchak, just that's enough. Enough said. Like, you want to know the good deeds? You know Avram, so that's it. That's Yitzchak. It's the same thing, and it's mamish like Avram. It's the same like Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. That basically, if you know, you see who fathered him, and now you see that this is who this is him. And Narachai mentions this also explains the other words in the verse that you could ask more questions on the verse. Narachai says there's two like unspoken questions here. One of them is, why does it say Yitzchak ben Avram? You don't always mention the father's name. Avraham did this, Yitzchak did that. You don't say Avram ben Terach, Yitzchak ben Avram. You don't always mention. I know when you get called up to the Torah, you have to mention the father's name. But every time the Torah mentions someone's name, it doesn't say the father's name. Why does it say here, these are the offspring or the good deeds of Yitzchak, the son of Avram? Why do you have to mention Yitzchak ben Avram? I don't need to know Yitzchak ben Avram. There was another Yitzchak that we might confuse him with. Why does it say Yitzchak ben Avram? So that's one question that is unspoken. In other words, Archaim didn't really mention that question, but he says now we sort of can answer it as well. He says there's also a second question. He says that what is the Vav doing in the beginning of the Parsha? Ve'ela toildos. These are the offspring. And it doesn't say these. It says, and these are the good deeds or the offspring. So why does it say and? Like continuation of the previous Parsha. So he says, well, it says Ben Avraham, Yitzchak Ben Avraham. It doesn't mean he's the son of Avraham. He says Ben Avraham means he is a Avraham son. It's almost like saying that he's a good boy. He's a chacham. He's a ben chacham. He's a chacham son, a wise son. He's a smart son. He's this one is a talented son. So this is an Avraham son. An Avraham son means he's a type of. It's explaining who Yitzchak is. Yitzchak is an Avraham son. He's a person who's like an Avram. He's a Avraham son. That's a description of who he is. It's not saying his father is Avram. It's like a Ben Chacham. Similar to Ben Chacham, there's a term you could use, a Ben Avram. He's a Ben Avram. He's an Avram style son. And that's what it means with the Vav. That the Vav in the beginning of the Parsha is and continuation. It means he continued in the way of Avram, his father. He continued in that way. And in addition to the good deeds that his father did, he continued. He continued in all these good deeds, and so that's the fourth interpretation, that it's mentioning, it's talking about the good deeds of Yitzchak, and it mentions that Avram Hoyledes Yitzchak, and keep in mind that like father, like son. That's another that's the fourth interpretation. Now comes the Archaim says, now that I asked that question about Ben, there's another way of answering those questions. So the Archaim is basically going off on a tangent, saying, "Oh, let me just mention there's another answer to that question." So it says Ben Avraham. He says that Yitzchak had two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Now, the pasuk says, "Elo toldos Yitzchak." These are the offspring of Yitzchak, and then it says Ben Avraham. What does the Orach Chaim say? You could translate it as saying he had one son who was similar to Avraham, although he had another son, Esau, but um, but one of them was similar to Avraham. So that's what it means. Ben Avraham means these are the offspring of Yitzchak. Ben Avraham, one of his sons was a son, an Avraham son, was a or, or one son was an Avraham, similar to Avraham. Okay, so that's like a side point. Now comes the fifth interpretation. And this interpretation is that it's interesting. The Orach Chaim emphasizes this, that compares. Let me mute everyone. He compares the Orach Chaim compares Avraham and Yitzchak's good deeds. The Orach Chaim says that it says these are the good deeds of Yitzchak, and the reason why these are the good deeds of Yitzchak, that they're very similar to Abraham. And that's why it says the Vav, as we explained, that he's continued in the path of Abraham. But nevertheless, the pasuk says, Avram hayledas Yitzchak. Keep in mind that the reason he was able to do all these good deeds is because Avram gave birth to him. So the point being that really Avraham was on a higher level than Yitzchak, because Avraham did these good deeds without having a father. So Avraham was more exalted in that sense because his father didn't do these good deeds. Yitzchak did these great deeds, and he continued from Avraham, as we explained. But Avram hayledas Yitzchak. But keep in mind that the reason why Avraham gave this, he caused him to be this way, because when you give birth to someone, you father them, you influence them. So Avram didn't have this. Avram's father was a idol worshiper, and so when it says Avram hayledas Yitzchak, what it's emphasizing is that Avraham is the cause that Yitzchak has such good deeds. And it seems from the Orach Chaim that it's bringing out the greatness of Avraham, that it's the pasuk calls Avraham Oyav, Avraham Oyavi, Avraham, the one who loves me. And the Orach Chaim brings out from that, it's a pasuk that it says Avraham Oyavi. Why does it say Avraham Oyavi? It says Avraham who loved me, emphasizing that even before I showed my love to Avraham, he already loved me. By Yitzchak, you don't have such a thing. Why? Because he was already born in a loved state. When he opened his eyes, he was already loved by Hashem. He was a child of Avraham. Hashem had already shown his love to Avraham. But Avram was the one who initiated the love. He showed his love to Hashem. So the Orach Chaim is emphasizing that Yitzchak, these are the good deeds of Yitzchak. It's a continuation. It's the Elah, these and these from before. They add on to whatever Avraham did. These Yitzchak continued in that way. But it says, but keep in mind that Avram was hayledas Yitzchak, that Avram really started it all, and it was somewhat automatic or natural for Yitzchak to continue in this path. He was born into it. Avram fathered him, and so really the unique one was really Avraham, that he initiated the love in the first place. By Yitzchak, when he first opened his eyes, it says the spirit of Hashem was already resting upon him. That's the term he uses. So to me, it's a little surprising, this interpretation, because the pasuk seems to be emphasizing the greatness of Yitzchak. Why would it minimize it by saying, by the way, Avraham was greater? It deserves to be thought about. Why would the Or HaChaim want to give such an interpretation? In other words, why would the pasuk be saying such a thing? These are the good deeds of Yitzchak. He's continued everything that Avraham started, and he continued it. He added. And then it says Avram Hayledes Yitzchak. He got it by nature, naturally. It was naturally handed down to him. Avram Hayledes Yitzchak, it was naturally handed down to him. Before, we were emphasizing that he was considered a tzaddik ben tzaddik. It's all emphasizing the greatness of his good deeds and how his prayers were answered and so on. But now we're emphasizing, sounds like it's emphasizing the greatness of Abraham, which is fine. It's just sound, but the pasuk seems to be emphasizing Yitzchak, not Abraham. Why would it then jump to Abraham? That's a little question I have on this interpretation. Okay, now we're doing the sixth interpretation. And the sixth interpretation goes as follows. Which is actually, it sounds a little the opposite of the previous one. And here he says that these are the good deeds of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. And by the way, Yitzchak's good deeds are even greater than Abraham's, because his good deeds are a righteous person, the son of a righteous person. So here he takes on this idea that we mentioned earlier, tzaddik ben tzaddik, but before we were talking about it in a sense of talking about the birth that Yitzchak gave, that Hashem listened to Yitzchak's prayers and gave him children because he was a tzaddik ben tzaddik. Now we're talking about the good deeds of Yitzchak, not about his children. We're talking about good deeds. And we're saying that these are the good deeds of Yitzchak, son of Abraham. By the way, not only did he have many good deeds, but they're actually on a higher level than his father's, because he's considered a tzaddik ben tzaddik, so his good deeds are able to reach much higher. Avram's good deeds was somewhat limited. He was the son of a Rasha. And even though Terach did Shuv at the end, but when Abraham was serving Hashem and came to Hashem and did his good deeds, he was not the son of the tzaddik Terach, or the one who did Shuvah, the Terach that did Shuvah. He was that happened later. At this time of Avram's birth, until close to Terach's passing, Terach was a Rasha, and so therefore Yitzchak's good deeds were on a higher level than Avram. So it's interesting how to reconcile this with the previous interpretation. Previous interpretation seemed to emphasize that Avraham was on a higher level than Yitzchak. Here it emphasizes that Yitzchak was on a higher level than Avram. You have to somehow reconcile it by saying that each one has a certain uniqueness to it. That Yitzchak was able to reach maybe a higher level, spiritual level, because he had a revelation from Hashem. But Abraham was able to reach the highest on his level from a personal perspective, from a human perspective. Abraham reached the highest. But Yitzchak was able to reach even higher, but not on his own merit, but from Hashem. But his avodah, his service, reached actually to a higher level. So that's what it seems to be emphasizing, that Yitzchak's avodah actually reached higher, because of course he was a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik. He had he was able to reach and penetrate even higher levels of holiness with his good deeds. So anyway, that explains why it says Avram Hayledes Yitzchak, that you should know that he's a tzaddik ben tzaddik, and therefore his good deeds reach even higher. Okay, and then comes the seventh interpretation, and the seventh interpretation is that the Toldais doesn't mean children or offspring. It doesn't mean good deeds. It means the happenings. These are the happenings of Yitzchak. So this is the seventh interpretation. He's translating Toldais differently. So far we've seen this is the third interpretation of the word Toldais. First we translate it as offspring, then we translated it as good deeds, and now we're translating it simply as moirais, happenings. These are the happenings of that happened to Yitzchak, and as they're discussed and described in the parsha. And what we find in them is that there seems to be a lot of enjoyable life that Yitzchak had. At least the way the Orach Chaim writes it, he says, "Roiv tuv oisher v'chavoi." A lot of abundance of good. There's wealth. There's honor. He seems to be. He seems to have a good life. That's what the happenings of Yitzchak. You know, it does mention. It's interesting. It does mention about they fought over different wells, but ultimately, I guess it was only his. It was his shepherds that fought. You know, Yitzchak seemed to get his. He had an abundance of wealth. His produce they were even jealous of him. So it sounds like he had covered. It sounded he had Oisher covered. He had Roiv Tov, all this abundance and a good life. Now Avraham went through a lot of suffering in his life, but it seems like Yitzchak. So it says that these are the happenings of Yitzchak, and it says, you know why? Because Avraham hoileres Yitzchak. Because Avram, his father, was a tzaddik, and having that merit gave him all these merits. So it's good. It's one of those bonuses that if a person's father is a tzaddik, so he can get extra bonus by he might the good times, he could merit the good times in life because of the merits of his parents, of his father. And so that's the meaning. That's the seventh interpretation. Why it says Avram Hayledes Yitzchak. That you should know the reason why he had all these good happenings is because Avram Hayledes Yitzchak. He was getting merit because of Avram. And so I guess for us, what this all means is we all have the merit of Avraham. Avraham is our patriarch. So we all get hopefully those merits. There's a place in Chumash where it says it lasts 1,000 generations and it lasts 2,000 generations. So we, Baruch Hashem, we are still within those numbers. And Avraham loved Hashem. It says if you serve Hashem with love, your merit lasts for 2,000 generations. We are still within those numbers, and therefore we still have the merit of Avraham. And so obviously the merit that Yitzchak had, and we get all of that. We get merit of Avraham, we get the merit of Yitzchak, the merit of Yaakov. So Baruch Hashem. So I guess these are little hints in the pasuk, in the verse, but it also gives us inspiration that it also makes us humble. That could be the reason why we have good times and the good blessings that we have. And each of us know what have our blessings. That it could be that it's not because of our own merit. It could be it's because of Avraham. So it makes us a little humble as well. Okay, so those are the interpretations in the first verse. Now comes the second verse, and this is also an interesting idea where the pasuk says Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka, the daughter of Besuel from Aram. Well, actually, let me translate that a little differently. This Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, the daughter of Besuel Hoarami, the Aramean, mi Padan Aram, from Padan Aram, the sister of Lavan the Aramean, for a wife. So the pasuk is interesting because why does it tell us Besuel the Aramean from Padan Aram? It tells us how old Yitzchak was when he got married. It's not something commonly mentioned, how old people were when they got married. And it didn't say that about Avraham. How old was Avram when he got married? And so the Orach Chaim says, you know why it says how old he was when he got married? Because it's explaining why did he wait so long? Why didn't he get married much earlier? And I think what the Orach Chaim is bothered with is there is a law in Shulchan Aruch. in the law in Shulchan Aruch says that a man, is not supposed to push off marriage. Uh, in fact, in Shulchan Aruch, it talks about from the age of 13. It's appropriate for a man to try to get married, and says, at least not after 20. And of course, if you didn't find the right one, at least you're trying. But the person shouldn't push it off. And so, why did Yitzchak get married at 40? So the pasuk is coming to give us an answer to that. And so it says that Bekach toyas Rivka. He was 40 years old because he took Rivka, and he had to wait for that time till he was 40, because it says in the pasuk that he took Rivka, the daughter of Besuel, the sister of Lavan, for him for a wife. It could have just said Leisha. It says loy Leisha, for him for a wife. Why does it say for him for a wife? The answer is because this was his destined match that was designated for him by Hashem. She was the right one. So he waited for her. Maybe mute everyone. So he had to wait for her to be ready for marriage. And until she came around, there wasn't another option for him, meaning that there might be a concept of having two optional shidduchim in the world. In other words, there could be maybe, in other words, this is an interesting question about shidduchim, how it works in God's eyes. Is there more than one person who's destined? Does a person have a few options? And maybe that's the idea of having people who get married, get divorced, get remarried, or people who are widowers and they remarry afterwards. But the point is that the Or Chaim here emphasizes that Yitzchak had only one option, and the one option was Rivka. And before Rivka was born, even though Yitzchak was ready for marriage, there was no one who was his destined match. And so, as we read earlier, Rivka was born when Isaac was 37. So, therefore, it turned out that it's not surprising that Yitzchak couldn't get married until he was 40, because you can't marry a girl until she's 3. And even then, she couldn't really have kids until she's 13. And so, until she's 12. So ultimately, he had to wait until she was able to have kids. And so therefore, the pasuk is explaining why Yitzchak waited till he was 40, and why Abraham also allowed him to wait. Why wasn't Abraham pushing him to get married? And the answer is because there was no one who was capable, who was able to was the potential designated and planned match. Zivug, no one was bashert. He didn't have his bashert in the world yet, so he couldn't get married. But ultimately, when he reached the age of 37, she was born, and that's when they arranged for Yitzchak to get married after she was of age, and ultimately they did get married, and that's why he waited, and that's why Abraham waited. And now we want to know about the Besuel Ho'arami. But before that, what, Maisha, did you want to ask a question?
I just want to say, I remember from a shiur in New York that we have two tatis. We have Abraham and we have Lavan through Rivka.
Say that again. We have two patriarchs.
We have Lavan and Abraham. Lavan through Rivka, because she is a descendant of Lavan, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we have many.
His sister, but I mean his sister. But I'm just saying that there's an evil part of. I'm just telling you what he said. That there's a part of us that is sorry, I was a Genovan, but that, and also that we have a very good aspect of ourselves. But this is what was right. I'm just it was written by a reputable Rob. So I'm asking you. I mean, it
I
just
think,
seems.
yeah, I think what you might be referring to, Moshe, is the fact that in the Haggadah it says, "Betchila oivdei avodah zara hayu avosenu." We start with the negative when we talk about our original the father of Abraham, Terach, Avi Avram, you know, and then we mention about Lavan, Bikesh Laker as a coil. So we do mention this idea in the Haggadah. Maybe that's what you're referring to. That's what the shear that you heard was talking about, that we do mention these things, but it doesn't mean that we like inherit any negative traits from these people. Abraham is our patriarch, and we are descendants of Abraham. And Abraham is who passes on the neshama to us, and we get straight from Abraham. So it doesn't mean that we have these negative traits from these other from these other sources. I mean, there's everyone has. What about the grandparents of Abraham, the great grandparents, all the way back?
I agree. I told them the same thing, frankly, that you're
things.
saying, because I read something of the same sort. That
Right.
I said, Abraham, we get all our traits from Abraham. That's why he's
Rahmanim by
important
Shanim and the Gemara talks about it, that we
Yes.
certain unique traits. Anyway, in any event, the next Orach Chaim talks about the questions. I want to just go through that. The question that I had asked about why is it mentioning the Suel Ho-Arami? Why is it calling the Suel the Aramean from Padan Aram? Either he's an Aramean. Why do you have to say it again? From Padan Aram, from this Aram cities. There would seem like there were two of them, but why does it have to mention both statements? He was Aramean and from Padan Aram, and so the Orach Chaim emphasizes here that we don't need to know whose daughter Rivka was, because we actually have it mentioned in an earlier parsha. And what it's really trying to explain is that why did Hashem listen to Yitzchak's prayer to have a child, to have children, and not Rivka's prayer? And the answer is because Rivka's father was not a Aramean, but that he was because he was Besuel, and he was the word Aram is really a similar word to Ramai, a swindler. So the reason why her prayer was not listened to was because her father was a swindler, and Yitzchak came from a righteous father, Abraham, and he was the son of Abraham. So therefore, the prayer of Yitzchak was listened to, and Hashem listened to his prayer more than he listened to the prayer of Rivka, because she didn't have the same merit of having a father who was righteous. So the answer to the question that I had asked, why does it say that Besuel the Aramean, means Besuel the swindler, not the Aramean? It doesn't mean he was from Aram. It means he was a Ramai. Ramai is similar letters, and it's that's what it's emphasizing, that he was a swindler. And what it wants to say is that although we don't have much information about Besuel, we don't know so much about his wickedness, at least in the revealed Torah. We do have midrashim about him, medrash about him, but and we do also know about Lavan, but we don't really have anything so clearly, nothing explicit. And so the Torah here tells us, by the way, Besuel was a Ramai, and that's why Rivka's prayer was not listened to as much as Yitzchak's prayer was listened to. And then it says she was the sister of Lavan. What does it mean she was the sister of Lavan? That Rivka was the sister of Lavan. So basically, what it means to tell us is, of course, we know that as well. And so why does it tell us this? right? We had the story of Eliezer's dealings with Lavan, Lavan coming to test him to check him out and see his wealth and who knows what. So we do know a little about Lavan. We know that her brother was Lavan. So the reason why it comes to tell us this is to show the merit of Rivka, that although she was the daughter of a wicked person, absolute wickedness, and uh, how is it possible that such a righteous person could come from such a wicked person? And you might question her righteousness. And no, I'm sorry. The question that Chaim is asking is not how Rivka could come from the Suel. He asks, how is it possible Rivka could have a son Esav? That's what he's asking. How is it possible that she gives birth to a child Esav, such a wicked child? It would seem maybe that it seems like something's wrong. Maybe she's not so righteous. So on this, it says that you know why she gave birth to a Esav? Because her brother is Lavan. And the majority of children follow the mother's brothers. And Rivka's brother was a swindler. And so Rivka's son follows, but often that's the case, that that they follow the mother's brothers. And so what was her brother? He was even worse than his father. And so therefore, that would explain why Rivka had, even though she's righteous, but she was able to have a child who's wicked. It was because of her brother. And that's how Esav came out. And this, if not for Lavan, actually Esav would not have been so wicked. Maybe he would have been righteous. The Or Chaim says, if not for Lavan, she would have had tzaddikim go out of her, only righteous, because she was a complete righteous woman. And it says that Rivka prayed opposite her husband, emphasizing that they were on the similar level. And so she was a righteous tzaddikas gemura, the Or Chaim says. And so the question is, so why didn't Yitzchak check out her brothers before he married her? Should have checked out the brothers. What was he doing marrying this woman? And the children come out like often, or majority of cases, it seems, it says Roiv Bonim, the majority of children come after the brothers of the mother. They follow the brothers of the mother. So it says, why didn't he check it out? So on this, it says Loi Isha, that this was his basher, this was to him for a wife, this was the one who was meant for him, and therefore either this is the way Hashem wanted it, so he had no choice. So either he didn't even look into it, or he looked into it and he had no choice. But the bottom line is that he would never have married her if not for the fact that she was the bashert, and this was what was meant. And so that's the story of the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka. Interesting, to end off like this, that that really he never would have married her. It was like even his marriage was basically because Hashem said this is the one who you're meant for, and this is this is it. There is one more little line over here, but I guess my time is up. All right, I guess we'll just stop here. Yes, David.
I saw an interesting thing from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe is talking about this pasuk told us Avram. You talk about Avram. So he says, why does it mention Avram twice in this pasuk? So he explains that that Avram is the idea of chesed, of loving kindness, and Yitzchak is the idea of severity, gevurah. So the message is that when you're speaking to someone, and the Rebbe says, and especially when you're speaking to a child, if you're going to be giving him some severity, which is the idea of Yitzchak, they should be separated. At the end of one's at the beginning of the verse and one's at the end of the verse. And you should not only separate it with an Avraham, with a kindness, a chesed in the middle, but it should be two cheses in order to separate the gevuras to the maximum. So when you're speaking to a child, you have to speak in a kind way. And if you have to give some reproof or some gevura, some strictness, it should be separated by at least two kindnesses to separate them.
Okay, shkoyach. Thank you very much. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful evening. I just want to mention, if any of you would like to put in a prayer by the Lubavitcher Rebbe's gravesite, I'm Be'ezras Hashem planning on going there tomorrow. So if you want to, or maybe Friday, not sure if I'm going to go to New York and Hashem tomorrow, but I'll go to the gravesite probably Friday, I think, maybe Sunday. Probably Friday. But please tonight, if you want me to put in a prayer, send it today or tonight so that I'll have it. Okay, sei gesund, everyone.